Hey, wake up. Yeah. Got my man Dave, got my man Dan. You know what time it is, and this is 2-6. Yeah. Ask us, we seatbelts, boy. You better strap up. Conversations is controversy. It's time to act up. Carolina Ballistics, where the precision's wicked. Tune in and listen. It get deep if you dig it. No reason to act tough. Carolina Ballistics Training Academy. Ain't no reason to act tough. So listen up.
Hey guys, this is Dan. Sign up for classes, buy merch at carolinaballisticsta.net. That's carolinaballisticsta.net. Yeah. Hey guys, welcome back to the Carolina Ballistics and Training Academy presents the Dan and Dave Show. I'm your host, Daniel Irwin. We are out here in Monterey, California. Continuing good work, doing our thing. I would like to introduce you guys to the ongoing guest, Mr. Sean Neville.
How's it going?
What's up, Sean? How you doing, my brother?
I'm all right, bro. How you doing?
We out here doing it. It's the last week to talk a little bit about conspiracies. This week, we're going to continue down that rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and things of the such. Today's topics are going to include the boogeyman of the right. Yes? Boogeyman of the right. George Soros. Yeah, we're going to start there. We're going to push on into Charlemagne the God, the Charlemagne the God and the Breakfast Club interview with Larry Elder, which I thought was really interesting. And we're going to conclude with a conversation of synthetic meats that are potentially cancerous that we are possibly going to be eating in the not too distant future. All right, cool. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started on the conversation. George Soros. Sean, give us a little bit of information on this man. Who is he? Why is people afraid of him? And what kind of global impact does this man has had in his history?
Well, George Soros is a billionaire, a Jewish billionaire. That actually matters. But really, I think the biggest thing about him is that he has had like an ongoing ability to take his money, and he has been brilliant at putting it in places that move his interests forward. Part of the reason why people are so afraid, why he's kind of become this boogeyman, is because for decades, all of these things have happened and his name just pops up. And it's not small events, it's huge events that have shaped and sculpted the outcomes of countries and entire regions of the world.
Wow.
And the roads all lead back to him. So, there's a lot of really wacky conspiracy theories out there about him and stuff like that, sure. But there are a lot of really, really verifiable things he's done that are both impactful and honestly pretty evil.
Pretty gnarly. Yeah, I believe in like something like 1997. He like collapsed the Malaysia's government by like devaluing the dollar or their currency. I was like, what?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was his encore. He did it to Britain first.
Wow.
So in 92,
yeah.
What he did was brilliant. It was smart. He got these billions of dollars in loans, billions of pounds in loans from the Bank of England, and he bought currency in all of these different areas.
Wow.
So what instantly happened was that now the British pounds that he was trading for these currencies in other areas became like super widely available.
Wow.
So it immediately devalued the British pound while increasing the value of all these currencies, because he had extended the supply of the British pound while he had retracted the supply of several different currencies around the world. What he managed to do after that was that he actually stopped, and beforehand he had bet against the pound that it was going to go down in value.
Wow.
So he made billions off of those bets. Then he turned around and paid his debts back and kept it moving. But he devalued the British pound to the point that the Bank of England almost had to declare bankruptcy.
Wow.
So
and inevitably that had to ruin millions of people's lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
He's
dark again, aren't I?
The information on him is complicated in that he was around during World War II, right? He was a Jewish person during the Holocaust of Nazi involvement in connection with the extermination of the Jews and dozens of other groups of the like. And it said that he was turning in other Jews. Is that true?
Yeah, he worked with a guy named Adolf Eichmann, and not Hitler.
Yeah, that
It
sounds like.
was one of Hitler's stooges. But basically, Soros is Hungarian, so
Hmm.
what he did was he helped them identify Hungarian Jews who had a bunch of assets, because a lot of people don't know the Nazi war machine was pretty much funded by stolen assets.
Yeah,
Like everywhere, whether it was in Germany, whether it was in Poland, Czechoslovakia, wherever they invaded, they just rounded up billions of dollars worth of assets and sold them off all over the world, used those to fund their war machine.
yeah,
So basically, he would identify Jewish families of means, and nobody thought anything about it because he was a kid then,
yeah,
and he's a Jewish kid.
yeah,
So of course, when you're seeing people that look like you get eradicated the world over, they would think, you wouldn't dream of selling them out,
yeah.
but he did.
Wow.
So he was responsible for several millions of dollars worth of confiscations. And then, of course, the reason why those assets could be taken was because those Jewish families were sent off to concentration camps. So, in his words, he did it because it safeguarded his own family. But it's like,
Yeah.
okay, how many families did you doom in the interim to save your own
Yeah,
skin?
there's this popular interview that was held in the 90s that really didn't age well in connection with what was going through his mind as he was, dry snitching on the Jews and yeah, it
Hmm.
was really funny because a lot of people point to this interview to say that, hey, George Soros is a sociopath because he didn't really seem to care. They were asking him, they're like, what did you think when when these Jews were going off to concentration camps and their assets were just going and what was going through your mind? He was like, I ain't think nothing. He was like, it's better them than me. That's basically what he
Yeah.
said.
I mean, long and
And
the short, yeah, you're right.
which was pretty gnarly to say and see. Um, but there is George Soros is, I would say he's a complicated man in that he you do see him do a lot of what's considered philanthropic activity. You see, back during apartheid in 1990 in the 1970s, he was donating large amounts um, of his finances to like sending black students to college in an effort to fight against apartheid. He's donated millions of dollars to correcting racial injustices, feeding the poor, um, and the list really goes on and on. But on the other side of the coin of that, you do see this underlying mission of a one government. What do you know about this one society, this open society concept that George Soros has?
Well, this is kind of like the real world equivalent to, the whole conspiracy theory of the New World Order.
Mm-hmm.
What the Open Society Foundation and foundations like it want is basically to create a world without political borders.
Yeah.
So there might be an America that exists, but America is not its own country. It's part of the world.
Yeah.
You know, he pushed it a lot in Europe, helped fund the EU for that very purpose so that the borders could come down. And if you believe in like the really hardcore conspiracy theories, and what he's trying to do is create, you know, a a one world government.
Mm-hmm.
But really, even the philanthropy that you talked about, it's all, what's called targeted philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't just give indiscriminately to whatever needs help at that time. It's targeted, like apartheid in South Africa. What also was happening was that within colleges, especially in South Africa, there was a big socialist movement.
Yeah.
And so when he was sending college kids to Africa, or not to Africa, to college, what was really happening was that, you got the socialist faculty that are pushing socialism as the end all be all, you know, solution to apartheid. You remember
Sure.
Mandela pushed that. Mandela was a
Sure.
socialist.
For sure.
So it
Who
was
was
almost like he
supported
was
by
funneling
Gaddafi.
people toward, yeah. I mean, he was funneling people to get indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Same thing has happened in Europe now. He's done a lot with like the Open Societies Foundation, especially, and the Quantum Fund have both done a lot with the migration crisis. Now, again, you go out to the really left field, and they say he's single-handedly fueling the migrant crisis. That might be a little far-fetched.
Yeah,
But there
and I
is
think
proof of.
I think they try to make George Soros like an unstoppable force. I mean, he's wealthy. He's very wealthy, but like he's not like God wealthy. Like, but continue what you were about to say.
No, and you're right. I mean, he isn't, and he gives most of his money away.
Yeah,
So something, what, 65% of his money
64.
he
Yeah,
gives
60.
away.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah. So
yep.
he's not God wealthy, but he's very smart about where he puts a dollar.
Yeah, and I'm
I
actually
mean,
happy you mentioned that because I think back in the '80s, his upbringing's really interesting. He basically, in the span of 2 years, converted like $100,000 in the in the '60s into like 4 million in like 1 year. Um,
hmm
in fact, by the time of like 1983, he was considered the most successful investor, possibly better than Warren Buffett himself. Like he was that guy who could convert money, and he was the way he played with his money was just like overly aggressive. Like he would like I don't know gamble 65% of his wealth, and then win. It was
well,
literally
see,
go hard or go broke.
that was around the time he created the theory of relativity in the markets.
Yeah, yeah,
That it's not
yeah,
about what is, it's about what's perceived to be.
yeah,
So
yeah,
he based that off of a whole bunch of stuff that had happened previous.
yeah,
Like, you look back at something like the panic in 1907 in America with
yeah,
JP Morgan. The whole reason why that run on the banks happened is because literally all he had to do was say that the banks were running out of money. It didn't matter that there was no proof. As long as people perceived that to be the truth,
yeah,
people ran to the banks. They wanted to get their money out. Of course, banks don't keep all your funds on hand. They're only required to keep 10% of what you deposit actually on hand to get out at any one time.
yeah,
So, that caused the panic. And he looked at different times like that, the stock market crash in the 20s, all of that stuff. And basically, that's how he ended up converting his money. And that's how he's been so successful, is that he understands it's not about fact, it's about perception of fact.
yeah,
As
yeah.
long as I can make you feel that X or Y or Z is going to happen or is the best way to do things, you'll do it.
And
And
what I really want to highlight in connection with what we're saying right now, in connection with George Soros, is 1 billion% fact checkable. These are not made up statistics. These are not made up facts. These are me and Sean. Literally apolitical individuals. We have no
yeah,
we have no dog in the fight. But these are just actual facts about the man. But continue what you were
oh
saying.
yeah, yeah. If people think we're too right with all this crap, then we can spend some time talking about the Koch brothers some other time because they're the big
Oh
man on the
yeah.
left.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
it's
Oh
the
yeah.
it's the same thing. All of this stuff when people say, "Oh, it's misinformation or it's conspiracy," it's all got roots in truth.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing about any kind of conspiracy is, find the root. What's the truth
Yeah.
that before you get into outer space, what's actually grounded in reality, and talk
Yeah.
about that. This is, that's what we're doing. Is this is stuff that gets dismissed as conspiracy theory, but is literally, like you said, totally fact checkable. I mean,
Yeah.
when you look at the way that he still uses his money, it's about perception. I mean, he
Yeah.
gave $33 million to Black Lives Matter. Why?
Yeah.
You think that he just thought that it was a great, a great organization and these kids are doing some fine work? No, it's about perception. If
Yeah.
he makes something out of this Marxist run organization, and they've admitted that they're all trained Marxists, then once again, because he's a person who buys into global socialism, it spreads that fact. It
Yeah.
spreads that mentality. And so what happens? That's going to warp people's perceptions.
Yeah.
Whether it's for the good or the bad is up to each individual. But that's the smart thing about money in general. Even, when I invest, literally, if I look at a company and I'm thinking about, investing or shorting a stock, I don't look at the facts. I look at the rumor mill.
For sure.
If there's a rumor, I shorted Disney because the rumor was I shorted Disney a year and a half ago
Mm-hmm.
because the rumor was that they were running out of money trying to keep up with their ESG score and all this stuff. And things were not going to go well for them in 2023. And sure enough, Disney is not doing well right now.
Yeah. Do you think it's
So,
because of all the expected pedophilia going on with Disney? Do you think that's part
oh
of
no.
why? Go ahead.
I mean, maybe it's part, but what's interesting is that it's actually loosely connected to George Soros because basically Disney and all of these big companies, if you notice this whole woke thing that's happening now
Mm-hmm.
with, gender swapping characters and race swapping characters and everybody's got to be a girl boss and all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
audiences are wholesale through their wallet saying, we don't want this. We don't
Yeah.
want a message. We just want to be entertained. So
Yeah.
you stop and you think, okay, why do they keep doing it? Well, one of the people who kind of shares a George Soros type mentality is a guy named Larry Fink. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, which is the pretty much the biggest hedge fund manager in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So they're part owner in every single major entertainment conglomerate on planet Earth.
Yeah.
So these are the folks who control, if you want to, like when Disney wanted to buy 20th Century Fox, and they say, oh, well, it's $100 billion buyout. Well, Disney didn't actually fork out $100 billion cash. They
Yeah.
do what's called a leveraged buyout. So basically, they understand they're taking on X amount of dollars worth of debt. They get a loan for that debt. They buy the company knowing they're going to go into debt to get it.
Mm-hmm.
BlackRock are the people who are the middleman that makes that happen. They have access to the money. So what happens is Larry Fink has stated on more than one occasion, we need to force better behaviors. We need to force better thinking when it comes to gender, when it comes to, feminism, when it comes to race. We need to force people to think the way we think.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that fact, today corporations are more seen by their ESG score, which is their environmental, social, and governance score, their impact on the environment, their impact on the social fabric of the world, and their impact on governmental structure more than their actual credit score.
Wow.
You can have a crap credit score, but have a high ESG score, and you will have access to more
Oh
leveraged
yeah.
money
Capital. Yeah.
than
That.
somebody that's the other way around.
So I mean,
So knowing that fact,
essentially that's why all these movies that we see all have some kind of agenda attached to them. Is that what you're saying?
mhm,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
it is completely the reason because let's just say that you're Bob Iger at Disney and you just put $300 million into a movie that nobody's going to watch and you're going to lose money on it, but you've got 1.1, where they have 900 trillion or $900 billion worth of assets under management by BlackRock.
Wow.
So what are you going to do? Are you going to put 900 billion, now 9 billion, I'm sorry. Are you going to put $9 billion worth of assets at risk? Or are you just going to risk that 300 million?
Yeah.
You're going to risk the million because that's the smart business move.
Yeah.
So, especially if risking that, losing that 300 million actually makes you more able to access that 9 billion that you've got in assets.
Yeah. True.
So you make the people who are holding your money happy. And that's really what it is. It's sort of, for lack of a better term, they've got the world by the balls. And
And we just
I mean,
gotta take these
that's
crap
what it is.
movies. we
Yeah,
gotta we
they don't.
gotta take it and like it.
Yeah, and that's really what it. They don't give a crap if audiences actually like the movies. That's
Wow.
not the point. The point is to put the message out there and be on that program. And everybody's doing it. Google's doing it.
Wow.
Amazon's doing it. And not
Wow.
just in entertainment, in the way that they create their structures. in every single corporate structure now, you see
Yeah.
there's like a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Their literal job is just to enforce those ESG requirements. That's
Wow.
it.
Wow.
So
Wow.
when you put all of that together, it's not just Soros by himself that's just some one man Illuminati machine.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, the powers that be, they're kind of all got their own agendas and they find ways, smart ones at least, they find ways to implement those agendas. Because again, that don't cost BlackRock a dime. They don't have to
Yeah.
put money out for that.
Yeah.
All they have to do is just say, okay, well, the next time that, oh, Paramount wants to turn around and merge with Lucasfilm now that Disney doesn't want them. Oh no, we're not going to let that happen. We won't give you access to the money for that buyout, and that's
What's
it.
also what's also interesting about George Soros is that so during World War II, he was young at the time, but was under the religion of Judaism. He was a Jewish person. But now he his stance on religion has changed. I think now he's an atheist at this point and moment, and a lot of the people
Mm.
in the Jewish community has an issue with him just because of his stance in connection with Israel. Um, Yet one of the biggest concerns in connection with George Soros and his Jewish origin is that there is a Jewish conspiracy. What do you think is behind that conspiracy? That the Jews have a conspiracy behind global domination, to control things, to manipulate things, and did it possibly have a impact on how Hitler perceived the world?
Well, it was Nazi propaganda to begin with.
Hmm.
I mean, because you think back to, okay, this is where we get a little controversial, but once again, pick up a history book. Everything I'm about to say is true.
Yep, it's documented.
One of the biggest reasons why Hitler was able to come to power and blame the Jews is because the great majority, after the Treaty of Versailles was signed in World War One, the
Yeah.
great majority of banking interests in Germany ended up falling to non-Germans,
Yep.
to German Jews, basically.
Yep.
So I think it was something like 85% of all state banks, all private banks in Germany were owned by Jewish people,
Wow.
which, through no fault of whatever. However, when
Comma.
the Weimar Republic came tumbling down, you've got to think, okay, these people were paying 1 million marks for one loaf of bread.
Yeah.
So, of course, just like when we had financial crises here, you look at the banks and go, well, you're in charge of the money, what are you going to do about it? And you've got fat cats sitting there and they're fine while
Yep.
you're starving. So then Hitler just says, well, I'll take the mask off the fat cats and tell you who they are. And
Yep.
they happen to legitimately be Jewish people. Now, mind you, I mean, the thing is, though, the
Say
thing
what
of
you
what
want about
happened
Hitler.
with that particular thing, but again, that's the definition of misinformation. Just
Yeah.
enough truth to make you believe the lie. Because then
Yeah.
what he did was he took this tiny substrata of hyper wealthy Jewish people
Yeah.
who were indeed complicit in the starvation of this country and several others,
Yeah.
and turned that into all Jews.
Yeah.
That all Jewish people wanted to rule the world,
Or complicit.
and that the Nazi stated goal was to stop Jewish domination.
Yeah.
Then the middle, the what was left of the Ottoman Empire after the establishment of Israel picked up on that.
Yeah.
That Palestine gets this big piece carved out of them, and Israel is reestablished in the 40s. This big war happens, and they say the same thing. Well, look, the Jews actually came in and took our land. They
Yeah.
want to rule the world. So they literally picked it up and just kept it going. And since then, people look at, again, it goes back to that thing. It's not about fact, it's about perception. Here in
Hmm.
the United States, Jewish people are very, very overrepresented based on, the percentage of society they are. And offices of power, doctors, lawyers, entertainment moguls, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a group of people who historically have been, this same narrative keeps popping up, because even before Hitler did it, you go back to the Cossacks, they said the same thing.
Yeah.
Jewish people want to take over the world. So it's literally this one piece of propaganda that
Yeah.
just keeps getting picked up and
Yeah.
picked up and picked up.
And it's
And
crazy
so,
because it's just
today,
kind of carried on into 2023, you know?
yeah, and their only crime, honestly, is doing well. That's the sad part. It's their only crime is wherever they happen to be, they figure
Yeah.
out a way to thrive.
Yeah.
You would think good for them, but
Yeah.
apparently, a lot of people don't think it's so good.
How dare you become successful?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Uh,
that's absolutely what it is, and that's why. And then, because they have such a tight knit community,
yeah.
if you've ever seen the statistics and the figures about how long inside of a community a dollar will circulate,
Yeah.
Jewish people have it by a mile. A dollar
Wow.
circulates in the Jewish community for almost a year. I
Whoa.
mean, in contrast, in the black community, it's 6 seconds. So,
It's in
you
and it's
know,
out.
yeah, seriously, as soon as we get a dollar, we're gonna give it to somebody who's not black.
And I'm happy that you made that statement because that pushes us right into our next subject. Larry Elder comes to the Breakfast Club, gets owned by Charlemagne the God, and I was tap dancing. I was yet the because I can't stand Charlemagne the God. I can't stand him. All right, so let's talk about it. One of the big things that was one of the highlights of that interview was when Charlemagne the God acknowledged, actually proposed a question to Larry Elder about has he ever been given the N-word wake-up call, right?
Hmm.
Basically, it's a phrase that they like to give conservative black people about being reminded that they're black, right? And he responded with that to Charlemagne the God and was like, well, were you given the N-word wake-up call when Joe Biden said that you're not black if you don't vote for me? And I was like, yowza. He did not have to go there. but
I'm glad
but
somebody finally said it, man.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things that really annoys me is that a lot of people who, particularly black people, who profess liberalism, is it liberalism, is that a phrase?
Liberalism,
Liberalism,
yeah.
that profess like liberalism, they like to assume that like conservative black people like forgot that they're black, or like somehow that we don't have the same experiences and we just feel like we're privileged or whatever. But we just really, a lot of us really just value like, the nuclear family. But there were some
Yeah.
statistics that you mentioned that Larry Elder did mention that you believe that were off mark. What were some of those points that he made that you felt that was off mark?
Well, I mean, he used some outdated statistics. It was stuff that was true maybe 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but not so much now. He mentioned like fatherlessness in black homes, that 75% of kids are born out of wedlock, so there's one parent there. Not true.
Yeah.
It's something like, I want to say, less than 50% of those homes have a father that was not involved at all. It was like 30 some percent.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
give or take 1 in 3
I think
instead
that
of
was
3 and 4.
I think that was one thing that was mentioned in connection with the CDC. I think the CDC, but we just got done talking about George Soros. But we're going to talk about the CDC anyways. They they just said that there is a myth in connection with like black men don't take care of their children, and they combined like women who have children with no father that lives in the home, and they say that
Hmm.
that represents the men that don't take care of their children. You know what I'm saying? And that's not necessarily
Right.
an accurate number because like sometimes that happens and men do the best that they can with the circumstances that they have. and they're as involved as they can be, you know. But I think the point that Larry Elder was really emphasizing was the need for the nuclear family and highlighting the need for the nuclear family when he was making the
Yeah.
statistics. Go ahead.
No, I mean, and he's not wrong there.
Yeah,
There is overwhelming evidence that that two married people raising their children is absolutely the best outcome.
yeah,
It has the least risk for every single marker of poverty and crime in a child, growing into an adult.
yeah,
So, I mean, he's not wrong there, of course, but it's still perpetuating this myth that we don't need. Shift it to the fact that, we need a nuclear family,
yeah,
that we need mom and dad together, committed to each other
yeah,
and dedicated to raising their children in one accord together.
yeah,
Because, even the best father not in the home is going to be a part-time father because he can't
yeah,
be there all the time.
yeah. And
Same thing, best mother, same thing.
yeah, yeah. Um, an interesting statement was made by Anton Daniels. Me and him, we have a common friend in Charleston White. He had a show
The
on.
thief.
Yeah, he had a show on a couple weeks ago in connection with that interview. He made an interesting statement that men that are predominantly raised by women tend to be part of the alphabet community. What do you think about that
Oh,
statement? I don't want to say
well,
tend. I want to say has a more likely to be part of the alphabet community. What do you think about that statement?
I mean, whew, that's deep.
That's
The
deep.
reason I said that is because I'm a man raised by a single mother, and I'm part of that third that the father was not involved. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm the statistic Larry Elder was talking about.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I also can understand it
yeah,
because I mean that whole nature versus nurture thing I think is very tough.
yeah,
I think that we just see today in general a lot of it, honestly, from what I've seen is I think about the discipline that I had to learn as a man
yeah,
that would have been instilled in me if I had a good father.
yeah,
And mothers are great, but mothers are nurturers. Mothers want to let you
yeah,
express yourself and explore and experiment. And you see these kids, a ton of these kids who identify that way coming up, and then they get to adulthood and they're kind of, they're not that way anymore.
yeah, yeah,
And I think a big part of it, for some kids and people today will say, well, parents shouldn't do this, but if a 10-year-old says, I think I'm attracted to the same sex, a mom might go, oh, well, okay. Well, you express yourself however you see fit. A dad will say, what do you think that means?
yeah,
What
yeah,
is it? What does it mean to be attracted to the same sex? What does it mean that you're gay?
yeah.
Or is it something that you heard on TV?
Mm-hmm.
Just as men, we're better at setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so I can believe it in the sense that, I never had that trouble. I was always, I was pretty much a guy's guy growing up. I was a
yeah,
jock. I like to fight. I like to rough house. I didn't lose any of my being a boy by being raised
yeah,
by a mom.
yeah,
But I also understand too that if I had come out with those kinds of things, my mom's a little different in that she probably would have said something, but still she would have been much more lenient about it
yeah,
than a father would have been. I think about my own wife. If we had kids, my wife's a free spirit.
yeah,
She would want our kids to maybe not like wear a dress or something that might make her
yeah,
uncomfortable, but
yeah.
if we had a son and he wanted to play with the makeup, she would let him play with the makeup, or else be like, "What? No,
Why is he playing with the makeup?
put makeup on the boy. Don't put makeup on the boy's face." And
Yeah,
for better or worse, and you can say, "Oh, well, you're outdated, blah blah blah, whatever. This is not your
yeah,
child." But anyway, just in general, I can understand where he's coming from. I don't know if
yeah,
that's necessarily true
yeah,
in the sense that because I mean, personally, the evidence that I've seen, I don't think that sexual orientation is so much a nurture thing as a nature thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some people are just kind of born the way they're born. You're attracted to
Yeah.
what you're attracted to. You can choose to be gay no more than I could choose to be straight. I
Yeah.
just am. It
So
don't matter what happens. I like women.
So pushing back into the interview with Charlemagne the God and Joe Biden, no, I'm sorry, and Larry Elder. Larry Elder made an interesting point, and when we look at it in hindsight, we can clearly see it. In connection with the media's treatment for Donald Trump and the media's treatment of Joe Biden, right? Like,
Hmm.
I think you can just hop on TikTok and see this man just shut off in the middle of a speech or, fall off a non-moving bike or, like I'm wholeheartedly
Yeah.
convinced that old Joey B and Mitch McConnell need to go ahead and call it quits.
Yeah. They need to retire. They're for no other reason than they're just old. I mean, I understand at the same time, it
Yeah,
feels like if you aren't doing something,
yeah.
you're just gonna shrivel up. But it's like, come on, at some point, there's a reason why retirement age is 65
Mm-hmm.
and why a lot of companies force you out when you
Yeah,
hit retirement age. It's
yeah.
because you're going into a state, and I worked in senior living for years. You're going into a state where your mind and your body are declining and regressing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, older people have great amount of knowledge, great amount of wisdom, but the number of times that I have seen people in their 90s
Yeah,
act like complete children.
yeah.
I've had to handle 90-some-year-old people throwing temper tantrums.
Wow.
I remember I had to break up a fight because basically one lady who was like a ringleader of a little table got
Wow.
mad because a new lady came and sat down with them. And I don't know if you remember Mean Girls. You remember the girl sits down at the wrong
Oh
table
yeah.
and the main mean girl's like, "You can't sit with us." It was literally that.
Wow.
Think about that. That was a high school movie. I
Yeah.
saw that in real life with people old enough to be my grandmother's parents.
So
So
what about the so do you think the treatment from the media's perspective on Joe Biden and former President Trump, do you think it was comparative or do you think the media was really strict on
God no.
Trump or what do you think?
Of course they are. I mean,
Yeah.
there's this guy on YouTube that I watch. His name is Jimmy Dore.
Mhm.
He's an interesting political commentator because, like I said, I don't have any dog in the political
Yeah,
fight,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
do like to know what's going on.
Mhm.
One of the things that he said, and basically his thing is he's just critical of everybody. It
Yeah.
don't matter who's in the White House, they all suck.
Yeah.
But he said, watch what happens. It was the day Biden had gotten elected. He said, watch what happens. The whole media is going to go to sleep. All of
Yeah.
this wall to wall coverage
Yeah.
is going to stop.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
nobody's going to care about Biden. And I mean,
Yeah.
I'll give you a case in point. You were talking about earlier, Biden making that "you ain't black" comment.
Yeah.
And you had the media, even black media going, I mean, he's not
Yeah,
necessarily wrong.
everybody's making excuses for this man. And I was like,
But,
y'all do know he called you guys hot shot N-words. Y'all are tracking that, right?
oh, yeah.
Y'all are
Yeah,
all
he's got a long
tracking that,
statement and saying
right?
some wild stuff, man. But like in comparison, I don't know if you remember when Trump was campaigning
Yeah.
and he made a point on one of his rallies. He was like, black people, you've been mistreated in this country. You've been given a bunch of empty promises.
Yeah.
You've been treated so badly.
Yeah.
Try me. What do you have to lose?
They called him a
Everybody was
racist
just,
for saying
I
that.
mean, they were like, oh, he's a racist. He's horrible. Who would say that? That's so
Yeah.
insulting.
Yeah.
I'm like, how are you not
How
insulted by an old white man with a historical track of racism thinking that he has the ability to tell you whether or not you're black?
Yeah.
But a dude that you think is a racist saying, hey, stuff has sucked for you for a really long time.
Try me.
What can I do to you that hasn't already been done to you? And I understand it's a condescending statement.
Yeah.
Neither of them are good statements.
Nah. Nah.
I'll put that out there either way
I mean,
because I'm like, there's still plenty to lose. I mean, let's just
that
just
is
be
true.
honest.
That is
There's a
true.
whole lot of progress
Yeah.
that could be lost if the wrong person is in power.
Yeah.
So there is no what you got to lose because we ain't that far down the totem pole.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
just the difference in reaction.
Yeah.
They equally suck. But because it was coming from this right wing Republican that people wanted to paint as racist, all of a sudden it's the most insulting thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because it came from a left wing dude, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I mean, that's the point. Black people shouldn't vote for Trump. Go, 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 go. And I was just sitting and I'm just leaning back. I remember getting in a discussion with a lady when I was talking about, she was like, well, you need to vote because Biden's going to get Trump out of office and blah, blah. I'm like, I don't give a crap of who's in office, honestly.
Yeah.
But she made the point that, Joe Biden is better than Trump. And I'm like, you do realize that Joe Biden wrote the 94 crime bill, which literally was the worst thing to happen to black people since Jim Crow. Like, legitimately, legitimately is responsible for more lifelong incarcerations of nonviolent offenders than any statute in American
Hey,
history.
hey, and I really need people to understand this. He wasn't alone. Hillary Clinton was right there. She called black people super predators.
Super predators.
So I feel like, all right. I'm gonna put this into perspective because I don't want to just throw that out there and then people will be like, "Oh, Daniel said super predators." All right, so I want to put this in
Preach to
perspective.
them. Preach
All
to
right,
them.
all right. What she was referring to were young African Americans from between the age of what, like 14 to like 42, I
24.
believe. Yeah, that weren't raised by their fathers, who were born and raised in crack, in the streets and poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Is that about a clear
Yeah.
definition of whom she was talking about? Hey, Sean,
Yeah.
where were you born?
In crack. In poverty.
So theoretically, she's calling you a super predator. So
Mostly.
I feel like this is important to understand when we're dealing with these politicians. All right, just because they get on some black outlet, let's say the Breakfast Club, it does not mean they like you. They're just vying for your vote. Okay, they don't like you. They're just vying for your vote. All right. Pushing on to our last
Paul Mooney.
conversation.
Oh, go for it.
Well, no. What are you about to say?
Well, last thing I'll say, Paul Mooney, the comedian, he had a really good point. He was like, it don't matter, red, blue. He's like, the only difference is whether the knife's behind their back or at your throat, but they all got
Yeah.
a knife.
Oh, yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. At least Republicans, are honest enough to put the knife to your throat. That's the only difference.
They up front and say, we think. What was that last thing that they just got rid of a couple months ago?
Affirmative action? Yeah.
we
Yeah.
think affirmative action is a bad idea, and we want to get rid of it. Matter of fact, we think affirmative action is racist.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna miss that leg up when I'm looking, if I decide to get another position.
Dang it.
I'm like, dang it, there's no more diversity hires. Crap, because I know when I was in a pool with like 3 or 4 really qualified white people, I'd get
Yeah,
the job just because
and
I
I'm
was the
the only
one
black
black guy they
person. And
needed
I'm
on
like,
staff.
oh man, they had their
Oh yeah.
quota. They had their quota.
Oh yeah, man. There were so many white people at some of these places. They'd put me on the brochure twice.
All right, pushing on into manifested synthetic meats. All right, Bill Gates.
Gotcha.
Good old Bill Gates, George Soros, CDC. We've been talking about it all. This is the show in which we delve into the stuff. Okay, synthetic meat,
Oh yeah.
lab grown meat that people are eating. Tell us about it, Sean.
Well, this is the new push, quote unquote, kind meats that are grown from single cells from a particular animal. And the big push, the marketing push, is that it's better for the environment because there's not going to be mass farming. It's kinder because you don't have to kill animals.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think the big downside is that there is a lot more to natural meat than I think that they want to admit, number one. And number two, this stuff is going to kill us. I, I don't have a better way to put it.
Okay, so what I'm tracking about this synthetic meat is that it is being developed by basically they call it oncogenetic cells, basically
Hmm.
rapidly growing cells that grows and grows and grows exponentially. Whereas, if you're lifting weights and you're pumping iron, your muscle is only going to get so big. Whereas these cells,
Right.
you can get this thing as big as a chair, right? And that's what they're creating this
Hmm.
meat out of. You know what I'm saying? Um,
Yeah.
but the the caveat is that these cells operate like cancer cells.
Yeah, that's exactly what they do. They mimic the growth of a cancer cell because you
Wow.
think about it, what is cancer itself?
Yeah.
Cancer is overstimulated cellular growth that your body treats as a sickness and eventually kills you.
Yeah.
So you've got these, like you said, the oncogenetic cells which grow like they grow. The downside is, of course, that there have to be tons of complications to ingesting that meat
Yeah.
because you're introducing trillions of those cells
Yep.
into your body every time that you take a bite.
Wow.
So you think about a steak, how many trillions of these self-replicating cells have you introduced into your body?
Wow.
And at people think that we don't get affected at the cellular level by food, but we do. We have to remember our skin cells, all of our cells are constantly replenishing. The
Yeah.
reason why people get overweight, like myself, but
Nah.
a
Oh yeah.
big reason why people get overweight is because when you take in junk food, your body takes out the nutrients, takes out things such as fat, because, and of course, because we're humans who evolved to store fat because it was so
Mm-hmm.
rare up until, a couple hundred years ago, the more it gets, the more it's going to take.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about that. Literally, a cheeseburger changes you at the cellular level if you eat it often enough. Just
Yeah.
imagine if we are consuming meat as Americans, like we are right now.
Yeah.
We are one of the biggest meat consuming countries on the planet. It's something like 45 to 50% of the average American diet is just
Wow.
meat.
There's
Now
also a
imagine half.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Mm-mm.
No,
Go
I'm
ahead.
saying, just imagine half of your intake being made out of cancer cells.
Wow. Now there is a concern that these cells can enter our bloodstream once we ingest them. And there is a level of proof that those cells can infect our cells to make those cells cancerous, right?
Of
There's
course.
also an go ahead, know what you about to say?
Oh no, I just said of course.
Now, there's also a higher concern. In fact, the CDC. I mean, not this is not the CDC. This is the other uh, government conspiracy group, the World
Yep.
Health Organization. Those guys.
WHO. Yeah.
Yeah, those guys. They said AMRs, which is the antimicrobial resistance, is a global health and development threat.
Hmm.
Basically, these antimicrobial resistance is basically they're evolved microbes that basically turn into unstoppable viruses. So the drugs that we would use to treat cancer, um, these bacteria are actually developing a resistance. So the cancers that we're eating are developing a resistance to the drug that we would take to treat the disease that we inevitably would give ourselves by eating these
Yeah.
meats. Which, like, so the
Yeah.
whole thing just sounds like, so why mass produce it if it's just going to destroy all of humanity? Well, the answer is quite simple. A buttload of money. That's why.
Oh
People are
yeah,
going to
the
get
U.S.
rich.
just poured over $1 billion into it,
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is where people say you get to do a little bit of conspiracy about it.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many bigger concerns than climate change right now.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, climate change ain't gonna kill us anytime soon. I'm
Yeah.
not saying it doesn't happen. It
Yeah.
exists,
Oh, sure.
but climate change has been a dire, we're gonna die in 10 or 12 years thing
Yeah.
for decades.
For sure.
Eventually, yes, it will
Yeah.
happen. The problem is, like the US's entire push into this market is because of environmental concerns.
Yeah.
But literally, that's jumping out of the frying pan into the fire
For sure.
because, yeah, you might slow down mass meat marketing and mass farming, which honestly is wrong. If you've ever been to a meat processing plant, they're horrible places.
Yeah.
Big mass farming facilities and stuff, they're terrible. They're dirty. They're disgusting. I mean, if you saw what those animals look like, you never want one to end up on your plate. However,
Yeah. Yeah.
that being said, this is something that will produce results in a few years, not a few decades,
Yeah.
especially given the fact that there are laws that are trying to be passed right now that would basically eliminate the ability for us as consumers to discriminate
Yeah.
against uh, against lab grown meat versus non lab grown meat because there would be they're pushing to have marketing laws in place so that if I'm a farmer who naturally and ethically grows his own meat, kills it ethically, processes it holistically and puts it out, I can't say it's not lab grown. However, the companies like True and all of those folks who are making this lab grown meat can call it kind meat, can call it environmentally friendly meat, can call it cruelty free meat.
Yeah.
So basically, they are allowed to push the pluses and the good parts of their product. The other side isn't allowed to discriminate by saying all natural, non lab grown.
Yeah.
Outside of that, of course, is for the average American. Me personally, I'm extremely, extremely discerning when it comes to where I get my meat from. If I can't trace it back to the farm it came from, I don't want it. So I don't just run into anywhere and grab a steak or grab chicken or whatever. I only shop at a handful of places. For the average American who doesn't have, number one, the financial luxury, or two, the time luxury to do that, and they just got to get dinner on the table,
Yeah.
there is no way for them to know what they're feeding themselves and their children.
I imagine
Yeah.
that they would mass produce this for um like fast food restaurants like McDonald's. They probably already got it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And that's where the acceptance would come in.
Wow.
Every single lower level, you know, type of restaurant would get this stuff. All of your fast food, all of your bottom tier, full service, Applebee's, Chili's, all those places,
Ugh.
the places that aren't really worried about food quality, that are worried about creating something functional for you to
Yeah.
eat, yeah, they get all this stuff. Because I mean,
Wow.
they're the ones right now that get, all the seafood is farmed, all of the plants they get are completely and totally, doused with every GMO on the planet and
Yeah.
every pesticide on the planet. That it's already poison. So they don't
So
care.
to we can deep dive into this for a
Yes, we can.
solid grip. Um I want to close out with one last theme, and that was the Purdue Farms um outbreak that they had. I think they had like salmonella or something like that
Hmm.
a couple years ago. Um I think they did like one chicken out of a random batch, and it was like 100% salmonella on that chicken.
Oh
And
yeah.
when they asked the owner about that, they were like, "Oh, we just did a random batch. We just pulled one chicken from a batch of chickens, and it had salmonella in it." And he was like, "Well, that was just one chicken." I was like, "But it was a random chicken." I was like, "That's
Yeah.
concerning." That's really concerning.
Oh yeah,
Wow. Wow.
it's and that's just that's the business. Honestly, the
Yeah.
funny part is most of the salmonella and E. coli outbreaks of the last few years have been on
Yeah.
plants, not on meat.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why there needs to be more stringent, uh, more basically more stringent rules in how things are packed and how they're handled.
For sure.
Cross contamination is extraordinarily easy,
Hmm.
and when you get into a mass producing plant like Purdue, you've got 2 times maybe to screw the same thing up before it hits everything.
True.
So I think
Very
in
true.
that case, like there was somebody who had been walking through the chicken coops and had, chicken waste on their, feces on their boots and ended up in the processing plant. If I remember that correctly. And it's like that's all it took.
Wow.
You know, hundreds of thousands of chickens, national recall.
Wow. Wow.
That's all it takes. That's part of the reason too why I'm really discerning about where I get my meat from.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We are Carolina Ballistics and Training Carolina Ballistics and Training Academy presents the Dan and Dave Show. I'm your host, Daniel Irwin. That right there was the man, the educator, the liberator, and the discerner, Mr. Sean Neville. Guys, thank you guys so much for tuning into our show. If you made it this far, you are the real one. We're out. Y'all have a great one.